Hi, welcome back to the Choir Lab. This is part 2 of our interview with composer Amy Gordon. But before we get into that, I have to ask you, of course, to like and subscribe, follow us on Facebook and Instagram and all those places at the Choir Laboratory. So, now that that's over, let's get right back into it, where we keep asking Amy questions about her process and everything else that goes into her choral composing. So, enjoy!
I think that's one of the things that, I'm sorry, I think it's one of the things that we were really looking for in starting the Choir Lab is to say, or to bridge that gap between the original intentions of the composer and the ended performance. And as we know, like the performance with a varying amount of ensembles or venues or anything like that can be very, very different from what the starting intention was. And at least to me, it's refreshing to know that you've thought about making more deliberate choices in the instructions that are, given in the score. I'm wondering if, like, even a tenuto could be misinterpreted, or if, you're having the tenuto to show a particular stress of it, and if it could be interpreted differently, or if it has, or, anything of that experience.
That is a really interesting question. And that process that you just talked about how a piece can be performed differently from venue to choir to director, at first, I think coming out straight out of grad school, like I had this like just very, very not helpful attachment to the MIDI. Like, this is not what the MIDI sounded like. This chord was balanced in MIDI and it's not balanced in the real world. And I think the more that I've kind of like worked with many ensembles, and now I'm having the luxury of hearing multiple choirs do the same piece, like different choirs, and I've actually kind of learned to let go of my piece being a fixed entity that has to have like this perfect, that a choir has to, and the only way a choir can succeed is to like unearth my perfect platonic form of this piece, and kind of realizing that like there's really a beauty in handing this piece of paper that has no intrinsic, it's just a piece of paper until singers like you and choir directors give it life. And I think that I'm beginning to love and trust that process a little bit more, of those subtle differences from choir to choir, from venue to venue. Like, wow, I didn't think to slow down there, but that actually really works. And if that's what somebody is seeing in my score, I'm actually kind of excited about that process. And I've started telling conductors who I really trust, you know what, like, this is a suggestion, but if you want to do something different with this, go for it. This is also your it's really a communication between composer, conductor, and performer. Mm-hmm. So I'm kind of learning to let go of mine being the only voice that matters, so to speak.
That's really fascinating. I love what you just said there, like that collaboration between the whole process from paper to director to singer. Like, that is such a cool process. I absolutely love that. Do you find that collaborative process has really informed your new pieces that you're writing?
Yes. So as a choral composer who's living, it's very important to try and write pieces. There are some composers that kind of, or different pieces that it's fine to just write what you want. But that might affect the potential future programmability of that piece. So especially when you're considering the level that you're writing for. I have learned to trust my inner voice when I'm writing something, and if I can't sing it after the third time, I think one of my friends said that, then your choir singer who is not in the head, they're not writing it. So if you can't sing it and you're writing it, then somebody who is just singing for the first time is probably not there's something about it that's awkward. There's a leap that's weird. There's something that probably needs to be addressed. And I've never regretted listening to that voice and simplifying. Maybe we don't need to divide into 8 voices here. Let's see if I can get this chord with 5. And certain things like ending one section on a note and then starting the section on a note that's near to that note, so that they're not finding a complete, a 6 below or something. Just and that all comes from experience of like being in rehearsals, hearing where choirs have struggled, not on any problem of their own, but probably something that I did that did not make their life easy. So especially if I'm commissioned to write for like a high school or a middle school, I want to do everything in my power to make them feel great and to sound great. And I guess that's other composers might approach that differently, but the more that I sing in choirs and the more that I write for choirs, the more that I'm kind of the mindset of let's write as clearly and simply as possible to get the effect that we want. And I think actually Brahms writes just brilliantly simple but very complex choral music. So
I think that says a lot because as the composer, you're the one that's setting them up for success, like in the long run. So, you want to set them up for a good performance, a good sound, a good everything. And I mean, it helps everyone in the long term. It helps you in your longevity of your piece to be performed more often. It helps the choir to feel successful about themselves and to be able to continue it. I think that's a really cool perspective to hear, and I hadn't heard before.
Yeah, thanks. It is something I've started thinking about a lot more. Kind of the more that I work and really form relationships with conductors, the more that I'm like, whatever I can do to make your job a little easier, the singers, whatever I can do to not make you like dread pulling out my piece, the better,
That's very cool. Have you ever found yourself in the kind of situation where you just like have a really cool idea that you really want to do, but like you just, maybe you found it's too esoteric or like, because every once in a while we'll pull out a piece and like we'll open it up and it will be just like the craziest modern, ridiculous markings, and like you read the composer's notes about like, this is just about the time and space and like all this stuff, like, but like they are so behind it, they are 100% committed to this composition idea, and like, as a singer, I can completely respect that. They have this like piece of art that they want to create. Like, do you ever find yourself in a position where you just like have to create this thing and put it out to the universe, or do you find yourself editing that nowadays, or with your new perspective, or have you ever just found yourself so inspired by a thing but not sure it was going to be received in a certain way?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And again, like I was saying earlier, I think that there's some individuality of like certain composers, might just, and also it depends on like, is this a piece just for myself? Is this a piece for a commission? If it's for a commission, I'm probably going to be writing it much more specifically for their choir, especially if they're funding it. But if it's for myself, I sometimes will just say, you know what, this piece is for me. I don't really care if it gets programmed. I just want to write this piece. However, I am finding more and more that this piece of advice that I forget where I heard it from, but it's really stuck with me. So if you're going to have one element that's really unstable, maybe it's like you're going to use overtones singing, or you're going to have a very, very complicated time signature map, then the other elements, it's very helpful if they are stable. So I guess an example would be like, maybe it's not, your piece is going to be very, very difficult. Even for, very, very seasoned singers, if there's a lot of, not that changing time signatures are hard, but if there's changing time signatures on top of maybe like microtonality, you have quarter tones. I mean, I've sung some stuff like this and it's in a different, maybe it's in like in kind of a very unknown language, or maybe it's just like nonsense syllables, and it's extremely polyphonic, and there's no help in the piano. That is really like, and maybe the rhythms are very difficult, and it's also not melodic, so a lot of disjuncts, and also extremely particular dynamics, like this note is pianissimo and the next note is fortissimo, and there's a lot of accents and tenues. Your average singer is going to pick one or two of those things, and they're not going to be able to do all of them. So if I do have a more complicated harmonic idea, then I'm going to try and find ways to simplify or to give something to cling on to, so you're not just on a cliff, And I found that way there's one or two things to focus on. Not saying that that it's bad to just kind of go for it and take a chance. But I do find it's good to kind of pick one or two elements to play with, then the other ones be a little bit more traditional per se, or a little bit more easy to sight read perhaps.